I would like to introduce you to our next participant. Poet, author, journalist, scholar, and inquiring sojourner, John Phillip Santos is a writer, performer, and media producer from San Antonio. He has written 2 memoirs and a book of poems. As an Emmy-nominated television producer, he has produced more than 40 broadcast documentaries and news programs on cultural, political, and religious themes in 16 countries for CBS and PBS. His journalism and commentary has appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the San Antonio Express News, the Manchester Guardian, the Texas Monthly, and other publications in the United States, Mexico, and Europe. Santos was the first Latinx Americano to be selected as a Rhodes Scholar, and he holds degrees in English Literature and Language from Oxford University and Philosophy and Literature from the University of Notre Dame. After 22 years in Manhattan, Santos returned to his borderlands home of San Antonio in 2005, where he now lives with his wife, the poet and teacher Frances Trevino Santos, and their daughter Francesca de la Luz. Since 2010, he's been University Distinguished Scholar in Mestizo Cultural Studies, teaching in the Honors College at the University of Texas, San Antonio. He serves on the boards of Gemini Inc. Independent Writing Institute, the Briscoe Museum of Western Art, and on and on and on. This man has, like this much more I could read to you. But one thing I want to mention about Mr. Santos is he was one of the first participants in 2011 on the plank and cinder block stage. And so now he's on this stage, and we're glad to welcome him back. Mr. Santos.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Buenas noches, everybody. Buenas noches. Good evening, Dobie Dicho enthusiasts. You know, I remember that first night here in 2011. It was a lot frostier. It was super frosty. We were all bundled up in parkas. It was South Texas friazo. Before I begin, I have to take a moment to just follow on with Mary Margaret's remarks about our compadre Bill Sibley, who was just an amazing force of nature and literary art and imagination. He was always inspiring and a kind of a nuisance in that he was interested in troublemaking, like inviting me to come to the first Dobie Dichos gathering in 2011. He knew I had this connection to J. Frank Dobie. We knew him in the Catula family as Tío Pancho, because he used to hang out with my grandfather. My grandfather was a grocer in Catula and had a long relationship with Dobie, because Dobie was a big friend of my grandfather's brother, my great uncle, who was the head vaquero at the La Mota Ranch, the Wellhausen La Mota Ranch. So I grew up with stories from my mom about this Tío Pancho who was always hanging out with my grandfather on the porch of the grocery store, listening to all these Mexicanos tell their stories and smoking a cigar, allegedly, that's been disputed, but my mom asserted that he was a committed cigar smoker. And then he wrote notes with a stubby pencil in a notebook. I would come to know his work later. He died in 1964, I think. I was 7 years old, and we need more of the Dobie spirit in Texas today. We need the spirit that espouses civil rights, religious, civic, intellectual liberty, the power of the universities to transform society with lively inquiry, unbounded lively inquiry. This is something that got Tío Pancho in trouble later in his life. You know, he didn't espouse those things without problems. But I would come to know his work primarily later through the book Tongues of the Monte, and it struck me that he was somebody who was an exemplar, as somebody who was a vaquero, a literary vaquero that became my ambition in life, very poorly realized, but to become a literary vaquero. And he also was cosmic. And what I want to read to you tonight is something kind of that goes more to the cosmic end of Dobie's interest, as we all know, in tall tales and big yarns. This is from a piece called How My Life Took Its Turn. It's particularly auspicious because he wrote it in 1957, the year of my birth. So I kind of feel like it was a gift to me, like a message to me. And it has to do with some memories he had of his interactions with vaqueros on his family's ranch. And it deals with the paranormal, the unusual. I talked about it in greater length in a talk you can see online called From the Archives of the Impossible conference at Rice University a couple of years ago. I talk a little bit more fully about it. But I just want to read you this piece of a reportage from Tio Pancho about this period of listening to stories of the impossible from the vaqueros that he interacted with, and one particular vaquero who has a very auspicious name. I heard the tales in snatches, and it had not been for the circumstances that arose later, they probably would have lain among many other dead memories. Furthermore, not until I was a mature man did I come to look upon the men who told the tales and participated in them, together with the ground on which they acted and to which they belonged, as being the most vital part of the narratives. After my Army service in World War I, I went back to my old job as instructor in the University of Texas. Long before this, I had ascertained that the love of literature and the ability to impart that love bore no relation whatsoever to the advancement of English teachers in the scholarly colleges and universities of America. I'd been overseas and learned a lot. Life at the university seemed pretty tame, but that wasn't the worst. My wife and I were doing worse than starving to death on a government claim. My salary was meager, and as a University of Texas salaries were at the time, but I was at the bottom of the ladder with very little prospect of getting higher up until I got a PhD degree, and I did not intend to get one. Uncle Jim Dobie had been after me several times to go back into the cow business. He was willing to back me. One day along the spring of 1920, he came to Austin and asked me once more why I didn't go to work for him. He owned 56,000 acres in LaSalle County and leased land in LaSalle, McCullen, Duval, and Webb counties, altogether a big spread. He had a ranch down in Mexico. He had business interests in San Antonio and elsewhere. He said he wanted a kind of segundo to go around and look after his affairs. I agreed to go with him. When spring came, I resigned my job at the University of Texas, and we moved to San Antonio. By this time, the cattle market had begun to falter. Instead of traipsing over the country looking after varied affairs, I was managing the Olmos Ranch in LaSalle County, straddling the Nueces River. I had never been entirely weaned from the ranch life, and I knew that I had just about reached paradise. One of the ranch hands was named Santos Cortez. He had killed a man on the other side during the Revolution and got to this side, the Rio Grande dividing the sides, of course. He was a good pastor, goat herder, an indifferent vaquero, a skilled hunter, often assigned to furnish camp with venison and javelina meat, and a lover of talk. Sometimes at night, he would come to my room in the ranch house to converse. He wearied, he told me, of talk confined to the sore back of a certain horse, the low water in a certain tank, the distance of a certain vaquero had run in the black chaparral out in the San Casimiro pasture before he got a glimpse of the outlaw steer he was trailing, the dry weather that had been seen and seemed likely to continue, and other such workaday matters. He craved conversation on higher things. Santos was a kind of free thinker and not at all orthodox in religion. El padre tiene huevos como yo was one of his heresies. God has balls like me. But he believed in ghosts. That's where the intellect of a sophisticate comes in. I myself accept without reservation the ghost in Hamlet, but reject the Holy Ghost as a metaphysical superstition. One night, after we had branched off on higher subjects, Santos told me of two remarkable experiences he could vouch for on a neighboring ranch. One was his own, the other a friend's. This friend was riding by the site of a long abandoned jacal one night when all of a sudden he felt the arms of a skeleton around him and realized that a ghost had dropped down from a tree under which he passed and was mounted behind him. His horse screamed in fright and broke into a run that the rider did nothing to hinder. It was about 3 miles to the ranch, and that skeleton clung all the way, and then at the gate, released its hold and disappeared. This did not pass with me, Santos said, but I know it is true. I'm going to tell you something that did pass with me. I've never told another. You are next to God with me and will not laugh. When Santos became earnest in this way, there were always tears in his voice and in his eyes too. Bueno, that was a lonesome camp where I kept the goats. At night, only the coyotes talked, and they did not talk to me. The pastor dog slept with the goats, and I did not have even him for company. One night, after I had been sound asleep for a while, I awoke with drawing my breath in quick pants like this. There was un bulto, a bulk on my chest, so heavy that it was smothering me. I always kept my rifle at my side. I tried to reach for it, but could not move a finger. It was like I was tied down with a wet rawhide rope. Tight, man, tight. I could not raise my body to pitch the bulto off. I tried to yell. I had no breath to make a sound, and my mouth, it was dry like lime. Look, my tongue would not moisten my lips. I was pinned back so flat that I could not bend my neck to see the bulto there in the dark. Pues what could I do? Then I remembered how it is said that thoughts of goodwill drive away the evil. I began to think of the good God and of the Holy Virgin. I thought hard, and in a little bit of while, there was no bulto weighing on me, and I was free. When daylight came and I looked for the tracks, I could not find any. It is a thing I cannot explain, nor you either, though you are well instructed and have been a master in a big school. These are not things of the earth. They are not of the earth even when you see them. One night, I was with 2 other men crossing the Arroyo San Casimiro at the Paso de la Gallina, and there, right above the palo verde tree in which the lone gallina used to roost, we saw a light so bright that it made my eyes go blind. Maybe it was 12 feet high, like a ball. It stayed there a little bit, and then slowly, it floated on down the creek. One man, thinking it would lead to gold, wanted to follow it, but it had not called my name. We stood still. It got a little dimmer, and then it just vanished, like a match that ceases to burn. In the course of time, Santos told me many other things. During the year I spent on Los Alamos Ranch, while Santos talked, while Uncle Jim Dobie and other cowmen talked, or stayed silent, while the coyotes sang their songs and the sandhill cranes honked their lonely music, I seemed to be seeing a great painting of something I'd known all my life. I seemed to be listening to a great epic of something that had been commonplace in my youth, but now took on meanings. A UFO story from J. Frank Dobie, y'all. Amazing, incredible. This is the man. This guy's the man.
Okay, so when you were here on the other stage.
On that, the makeshift plywood cinder block joint. Yes.
In 2011,
Yes.
Your reading that night was a selection from A Texan in England, Dobie's book, That. So
right.
What inspired you to choose a story from his Texas autobiography for tonight?
Well, I've always been interested in the autobiographical thread that's woven through Dobie's telling of tales, to kind of discern that life that I had reports of, echoes of from the Lopez's of Cotulla. And, I'd embraced that Texan in England book because, I was going to study in England in this savage country. I was going to go live among these savage natives.
Oh.
And so I wanted Dobie's counsel. I regard Dobie as really one of the three great 20th century Texas literary voices. And he was my counsel. So this piece, as I said, I found this piece as I was thinking about the way that woven through the story of Texas are all of these inexplicable stories of the impossible, encounters with the unknown, encounters with the impossible, with the unknowable. And to find it as a motif in J. Frank Dobie, in this kind of great folklorist.
Who'd have thought it, right?
It reaffirms his immortal value. Yeah.
His immortal value.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Guy,
His immortal
the
value.
Dude.
Yeah.
He's the dude abides.
I love that. Okay, so Dobie was decidedly rooted in the soil where he grew up in South Live Oak County. In fact, in another section of Some Part of Myself, he says, I belong to the soil myself, and the people of it are my people. So he believed that people's roots are important. And he further says, if people are to enjoy their own lives, they must be aware of the significance of their own environments. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Mary Margaret, this is really the story of my writing life, to come to know that I wasn't born at the edge of empires. I was born at the center of this epic that Dobie refers to at the end of this passage, the epic of South Texas, the Tejano world that is bounded. It's kind of like Brownsville, Corpus, San Antonio, maybe Eagle Pass, Laredo, Browns. So that world, this world that we're in tonight, has this extraordinary world story of meeting between many peoples, millennial peoples, the indigenous peoples, the Spaniards who came later, and then all the world that has come since. This crossroads of every civilization on the planet. Here in South Texas.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Here in brush country soil.
Right here in Oakville, even.
So in my family, we owned with pride that heritage in Cotulla, in Mier, in Camargo, in Guerrero Viejo, Revilla, Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville. So it's to really affirm the literary centrality of South Texas in the great human epic. And J. Frank Dobie was a visionary in telling us that story long before we could even intuit it. And here we are tonight, celebrating it.
Celebrating
That is what we're celebrating.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Phillip Santos.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Margaret.
pass me by and